Well, Raiders fans, that moment has come. I'm here to review your team's 2019 season. I'll make you a deal. I won't mock you guys too bad, and you don't hate me forever. Deal? All right. When you look at the Raiders after what happened in 2018, John Gruden's hired. It's clear and obvious that this team is going to undergo a rebuild, which in some ways can make sense because based off of the roster and talent that they had, they were nowhere near a contending team, which led to the, at the time, very unpopular trades. First, sending Khalil Mack to the Chicago Bears before the season began, and then during the season, sending Amari Cooper to the Dallas Cowboys for a future first round pick. And last season was in some ways a really, really rough go for Raiders fans. You got the specter of this team's eventually moving to Vegas. They're not going to be in Oakland anymore. John Gruden, what the hell is he doing? Your first round pick, Colton Miller, looked terrible at tackle. Like, you go on and on and on. But this offseason, it felt like they made a solid move with the hiring of Mike Mayock to be their general manager. And this was the moment in time where you could say the rebuilding project took its next step, especially with the trades made the previous year. Khalil Mack to the Bears, Amari Cooper to the Cowboys. The Raiders were going to be sitting on 3 first-round picks and in a real position of power in that 2019 draft. And you were wondering how much change was going to happen, how much were they going to improve. And I got to say, early on, the returns and the results looked relatively positive and promising. The Raiders started off 6-4. And, for all the grief that Raiders fans got for the Khalil Mack trade especially and also the Amari Cooper trade, when they went to London and beat my Bears ass, Bears fans, we deserved it. We earned the trash talk from them. There is no question. They were the butt of so many jokes last year. They had listened to so much crap. They went into London, spanked the Bears. I don't care how close you thought the score was. They spanked the Bears. Even when the Bears took the lead in the fourth quarter, they still spanked the Bears. But the Raiders are sitting there at 6-4, whereas a team like the Chicago Bears is coming to the very shocking realization to some people, I don't know why it was shocking, that Mitchell Trubisky not only is not the guy, he just flat out sucks. And meanwhile in Dallas, the Cowboys beating bad teams, not really beating any good teams, struggling to stay at 500. So here are the Raiders, 6-4, 6 games left in the season, which included a stretch of 5 straight what you call road games, including the game in London, so on and so forth. You sit there and you wonder sometimes if the league has it out for the Raiders. And that's having a stretch like that with that many what you would classify as non-home games in a row, you really start to wonder. And you wonder if that eventually caught up with the team a little bit because they went on then to lose their next 4 straight, putting them at 6-8, and you're saying, ooh, okay. So much for the hope and the positivity. Reality's kind of crashing back down to earth a little bit. This team is at least a year away from really being in the mix for a playoff spot, which at that point in time, I did a video asking where the Raiders fans were because, man, they got awful quiet real quick. And frankly, y'all did. Y'all absolutely did. Y'all were trashing the Bears because you beat them, as you should have. But then as you're sitting there and trashing them, you forget the key component of, it doesn't really matter if your team doesn't make the playoffs either. That's a fact. And, yeah, they were still alive in the playoff race in Week 17 because a bunch of things that had to happen happened in Week 16. So here come the Raiders fans emerging back from the graves of Al Davis to start talking some more trash. And then they got quickly eliminated in Week 17 and all is right with the world again. As you look back at the season and some of the performances, Derek Carr had an efficient but not really spectacular season by any stretch of the imagination. Josh Jacobs, who was drafted with the pick that was acquired from the Bears for Khalil Mack, he was a force in the running game, a potential Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate, the leading candidate to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was a stud. Darren Waller, the tight end, he was an absolute revelation. Great story, too, a guy that had been his own worst enemy, had some addiction issues, some bad decision-making issues. Now he comes back and he puts together a monster season, gets a big contract extension from the Raiders, and it was merited and deserved. 2018's first-round pick, Colton Miller, improved significantly in year number 2. While he's not all the way there yet, there was definite growth and progress there for him on that offensive line. The pass rush was improved in 2019, no question about it. You got Maurice Hurst up the middle. Then you got 4th-round pick Max Crosby sitting there and getting double-digit sacks. So a team that really struggled to get after the quarterback at all last year did a much better job of it this go-around. Still overall, though, struggling to stop opposing teams' passing games, and I still think that's in part a reflection not so much of coaching, but just in general an overall lack of talent on this Raiders roster, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So it was a season that held some promise, held some potential, held some hope for Raiders fans. And even up until Week 17, as unrealistic and unlikely it was going to be, you still had a chance at the playoffs. Unfortunately, if all the other things would have happened that you needed to happen anyways, it didn't matter because you let Drew Block beat your ass. But them's is the breaks sometimes. And now you look ahead to this upcoming offseason, and you use that 2019 draft with all that draft pick capital they had to kind of determine how things could potentially go here under Mayock and under John Gruden's leadership, with them calling the shots. I think you definitely could say they got some really, really good performances out of their draft class, with the potential that this draft class could be even better. Cleveland Farrell had 4.5 sacks. Like, he's a good player. I liked him, but I'm sorry. Taking him over Josh Allen was stupid, and I think a lot of Raiders fans would agree with that, especially when you look at Josh Allen put up double-digit sacks in Saxonville as a rookie. But Josh Jacobs, Offensive Rookie of the Year, he was a stud. He was a beast. He was a force in that running game. Like, they found their dude in that running game for the next few years to come. What's really crazy about it is the turnaround and the improvement that the Raiders showed this year came with limited production from the number 4 overall pick, who was a massive reach in Cleveland Farrell, and then their 3rd first-round pick, the safety from Mississippi State, Jonathan Abram, missed 15 games due to injury. He basically was a non-factor the entire season. So all that talk about the 3 first-round picks that they got a little bit of production out of one of them, a hellified amount of production out of one of them, and absolutely nothing out of the 3rd. So what happens if either Farrell or Abram becomes an impact player on that defense? Imagine how much better this draft is going to look for them. Trayvon Mullen had 10 starts at corner, the 2nd-round pick from Clemson. 4th-round pick Max Crosby had 10 sacks. He was among the rookie leaders in that category, a guy that will get surely some Defensive Player of the Year, or Defensive Rookie of the Year votes, A tight end Foster Moreau was nice in that kind of complimentary role to Darren Waller, 21 catches, 174 yards, 5 touchdowns. Then you look at Hunter Renfrow, all 45 years of his majestic wide receiver ass. You know, you're talking about a guy here. How did he fall to the 5th round? It just made no sense to me. And he responded with 49 catches for 605 yards and 4 touchdowns. Problem was, he was easily the team's best wide receiver. But some really good production, some really good results out of that draft class, with them not really getting a ton out of 2 of the 3 first-round picks. So if they do get more out of those other 2 first-round picks in Farrell and in Abram, then this draft class could look really, really good down the road for the Raiders. What's really fascinating to me about how this all went down, though, was you even start off before the season. The one thing we didn't talk about, which seems like the glaringly obvious thing to talk about, was the whole Antonio Brown saga and the Antonio Brown situation. You trade the 3rd and 5th round pick when talking about this draft class to Pittsburgh to get Antonio Brown, and on the surface it felt like it was one of those you absolutely had to make the move. It was one of those low-risk, high-reward type of situations. The cost was not prohibitive at all. You make that deal every time when you possibly can. Except Antonio Brown went nuts and ultimately got himself right the hell out of Oakland, losing guaranteed money to boot. So when you look at it, based off of the drama and the saga that came along with Antonio Brown and the feet and the this and the that, the fact that this team went 7-9 is actually pretty incredible, because that would have absolutely ruined a lot of other organizations. It absolutely would have, but it did not here for the Raiders. And you look at them now, they're starting to amass a young core of talent. They've got about $70 million in cap space without a ton of real notable free agents that they have to take care of. So the Raiders are in a really good spot here and still dealing with a bit of a position of power in this 2020 draft. They got their own first-round pick at number 12. They got the Bears first-round 19. They've got 3 third-round picks, a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick, 7th-round pick. So they've still got a lot of draft pick capital to play with here, where they can go target guys. If they want to move up the board, they can do that. They can feel inclined to move down and get additional picks this year and next year. And they can potentially do all of that. But in terms of what this team needs, I think it's very simple. On the outside, they need a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2. Now, I don't know if you would invest necessarily both first-round picks in that position, but one of your 2 first-round picks really badly, desperately needs to be a number 1 type of wide receiver, which fortunately enough for the Raiders, it works out well. Their number 1 team need also comes in an area of this draft where the talent and depth is really, really good. So you get one of these guys at pick 12 or 19, then you turn around and get another guy somewhere in day 2, probably in round 3. Pair them with Hunter Renfrow, and all of a sudden you're feeling pretty good about the weapons that Derek Carr has in that passing game under John Gruden. Feel really good about it. And it feels like right now you talk about wide receivers that would make a ton of sense. A guy like CeeDee Lamb from Oklahoma. I don't know if it's quite to the threshold of CeeDee Lamb no matter what, but damn it all, I think some Raiders fans might agree that just might be the way it is. Then you look on the defensive side of the ball, I think their linebacking core could certainly use an upgrade, both inside and outside. Not necessarily saying that needs to come in round number 1, not at all. But it wouldn't surprise me to see this team get into a position where they move up from like a 12 to an 8 or a 9 to take a CeeDee Lamb, part with one of those third-round picks, and then at pick 19, maybe take Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma. Now, if you're talking about you did that as a Raiders team, then you're really starting to talk about something good to really, really latch onto, and you're talking about a team that probably contends for a playoff spot in 2020. But that said, when you talk about this rebuilding project, and you talk about all of this with the Raiders, the draft picks and everything else, you do get to a point in time where you really have to question just how effective this rebuild is and how effective it's going to be when you're overpaying for Derek Carr. Like, is it really truly a rebuild if you're still hanging on to a previous regime's quarterback that really hasn't done a whole lot for you? Like, he's put up some numbers sometimes. You had 1 playoff appearance with him, but that's 1 playoff appearance, and he's been the starter now for 6 seasons. I mean, you got to get a hold of yourself. Can't get too carried away by accepting mediocrity here. So you look at this draft, it feels like it could be a moment in time where the Raiders invest a pick in the quarterback position. I don't think that necessarily comes in round number 1, but it wouldn't surprise me if it came in round 3 or round number 4. But again, when you talk about Derek Carr, the money that you're paying him, the production that you get from him, do you really have confidence that even if John Gruden and Mike Mayock build up this incredible roster around him, that you're going to win a championship or contend for a championship with him as your quarterback? If you do, then you're probably not going to listen to anything else I've said throughout the whole course of this video because you believe that he's going to be the guy no matter what. But for others, then you start to wonder, what do the Raiders do to make sure that they get that young quarterback to build around, because we do not think that Derek Carr is that guy. And I think that's something, like, as an organization from a philosophical standpoint, that's going to have to be worked through and is going to have to be discussed. Just because Derek Carr is a quarterback right now doesn't mean he needs to be long-term, and how much longer do you want him to be the quarterback, and can your rebuild truly complete its cycle with having Derek Carr be the quarterback the entire time? And the fact is, I don't know. But when you really look at this for the Raiders, let's say they were able to get that young quarterback. Like, for a team that struggled so mightily during the last decade, that made 1 playoff appearance since that 2002 Super Bowl losing season, you look at it and you say, the draft pick capital that they got, some of the guys that they've gotten, they've been able to find some steals and dot. All of a sudden you look at the Raiders, and if Mayock and Gruden do some of the things that they need to, and they do some good things, some of the right things, then you're talking about a team that is a potential future Super Bowl contender and potentially looking at being one of the best teams in the league in this now decade, which probably will go over very well with their new fan base there in Las Vegas.